Hey guys, let's talk about how your partner can sponsor your residence permit in the Netherlands. I recently changed my residence permit from an international student to a Dutch partner residence permit, and in this video I'm going to share the processes that was required in changing my residence permit. For the sake of this video, I will call my partner the sponsor and me the foreigner, just to make it very clear. My name is Jamie Adams. If you're seeing me for the first time, in 2022 I moved here to the Netherlands to live with my partner and start my master's degree, and in this channel I share updates on processes, integration, and just basically life here in the Netherlands. So first, let's talk about the process. What is the process of changing from your student residence permit to a Dutch partner residence permit? In my case, I had the international student residence permit and I wanted to change it into the partner residence permit. There were 7 steps that I had to do. First, check the requirements. Did I meet the requirement to change from this to this? Secondly, I had to gather the evidence. After checking the requirements and it checked, do I have the evidence to show that we meet the requirement? And thirdly, we had to apply. Then we had to fill the forms and do the necessary documentation and send it to the IND. The next part was that we had to pay. We had to pay a certain amount for the application process. After that was the waiting time. We had to wait and see what the outcome of the decision was. We got the decision and the decision was positive. After the decision was gotten, the next part was simply to collect your residence permit. So now that we've talked about the processes, now let's talk about the requirements. The first requirement that must be met is the sponsor and the foreigner must be in a relationship. The accepted status are they both are married, or they are registered partners, or they are in a long-term relationship. The second requirement is that you both live in the same address. And the third requirement is that both of you are 21 years old or above. However, if one person or the both of you are below 21 years old, there is an exception for this, and you can look on the IND website to find out more about this. So the next requirement is your sponsor has to be Dutch or have a valid Dutch residence permit. This next requirement is about the income. So the sponsor, as the case might be, must have an income that meets the income requirement. The income requirement is a little more complicated because you have to prove 3 things. You have to prove that it is independent, it is sufficient, and it is sustainable. There is a way to prove this, of course, and it differs based on the situation that you're in. Some people have self-employed employment. Other people have paid employment. Some have fixed contracts, others have temporary contracts. So you can go on the IND website and look into the income requirement for the situation that you as the sponsor find yourself, or your partner as the sponsor find themselves. There is also a calculator that can help assess if the applicant's income meets the requirements. And the final one is that sponsor must sign a declaration that they are the sponsor. And this is why I'm using the term sponsors. So the sponsor must sign, hey, I am the sponsor and I want to sponsor his or her residence permit. But what is not required? I've mentioned a few things that are required. However, when I was in this process, I was questioning, do I need to have basic civic examination? Do I need to apply for an MVV again? I was basically a little bit confused on what to do. So one of the things you don't need to do is basic civic examination. You do not need to have the A1 or A2 Dutch that you would normally have to do if you are in a foreign country, since you're already in the Netherlands. And you also do not need to apply for MVV because you already have a residence permit. In my case, it was student residence permit. So I just had to go through the mentioned requirements and apply. So basically, you will have to provide official documents and personal documents to back up your application. All official documents must be legalized, and this depends on your country. For some country, it could be in the Foreign Affairs Ministry, and in some other country, it could be the embassy, the Dutch embassy in their country. So in my country, my documents, the official documents that I had to provide, were legalized in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. This could differ based on applicant's country. So the documents must either be in English, German, Dutch, or French, otherwise they have to be translated. Now let's talk about the evidence that you need to show that you match up to the requirement. In my case, the very first evidence we had to provide, myself and the sponsor, my partner, is proof of income. The sponsor had to prove that he had sufficient, sustainable, and adequate income, right? And he had to use three evidence to prove that. The very first evidence is his employment contract. He had to show the fixed employment contract. I think it has to be 1 year of employment, but since his was fixed, it fell under that 1 year employment contract. Second thing he had to provide is an employer declaration. He had to take this form to his employer, and he and the employer had to sign it together. And then the third thing that was required was his pay slip. He had to provide a 3-month pay slip based on the situation that we are in. However, there are other situations. There are situations like if you have just less than 1 year contract, which is very common in the Netherlands. You can also apply if you meet some of the requirements that are stated. And there are also people who are self-employed. You can also check the requirements, like I said. So the next evidence we had to provide is a declaration of relationship, which was just something we had to sign, myself and the sponsor. The foreigner has to also prove that they are unmarried. And this means that you have to provide unmarried certificates, something about Spinter's certificates. You can get that from your country. So you have to prove this by providing that certificate. And if your Dutch partner if your sponsor is from the Netherlands, he doesn't have to prove. But if your sponsor is not from the Netherlands, then he has to also prove that he is unmarried from his country. And if you've lived in a different country for a long time, supposing you didn't live in your country for the last 5 years, you were living in a different country, you also have to prove in that country that you're not married. So both in your home country and in the country you've lived for a period of time, you have to provide the certificate that says you were not married in any country. So the final step is to provide evidence of your relationship. So this is very, very important. So there is a questionnaire for the residents with partner, right? You have to fill this and provide adequate evidence that you both are together. So you must answer the questions in the questionnaire as adequate as possible. For example, you have to provide letters if you have them, you have to provide photographs, you have to provide emails, you have to provide plane tickets, everything to show that both of you are together. If he visited you while you were in your country, you have to share that information. If you visited him before you moved to the Netherlands, you have to share that as well. I particularly chose to share more on when he visited my country and all the informations that all the pictures, time with my family, and all of that. I shared that we had adequate conversation. We always talked every day before I moved to the Netherlands, so there was a lot on our conversations on WhatsApp and what have you. But it was too much, so we couldn't share all that information. We decided to choose 15th of each month, and all the informations on the 15th of each month, we took out the charts of every 15th. So on the 15th of January, the charts we took, 15th of February, we did that for all the period we were together and added that into a file. So all this information, his plane tickets, my time here in the Netherlands with his own family, everything was put together and sent to IND. So now the application process, there are two application processes. You can either decide to apply online or you write a letter through the post to IND. In our case, we were not allowed to write online. In most cases, when you're changing your residence permit, you're not allowed to apply online. You have to provide adequate evidence through post, send it to the IND office. So we sorted out the information. First, we had the files we had to sign. We printed out this 72 pages of documents. We signed and filled every part that was peculiar to us. We went ahead and took the appendix and the evidence to support each appendix. We put them in separate files, and we just put everything orderly to make it easy for whoever is going through that to see that everything is in order, giving them no reason to say no. Yeah, so the next is you have to pay for the application. The fee that we paid was 228 euros at the time we applied. This can change in the future, probably higher or lower. If you're applying online, you must pay while you're applying. But if you're applying by post like we did, the IND first gets your application and then they will send you an invoice that you have to pay. So they will send it through the mail. The popular blue envelope, you would get it by mail. The next step is to wait for a decision. The decision usually takes 90 days. However, in our case, we got the decision back in 6 weeks. Once you get your decision, it's either approved or not approved. In our case, it got approved, which meant we can go on to the next stage of collecting the residence permit. We got the residence permit by booking an appointment with the IND and going up to pick the resident. However, if you don't get a positive response from the IND, you are allowed to appeal again. So, am I allowed to have the both residence permits? In the Netherlands, it's allowed to have more than one residence permit. I kept my international residence permit and my Dutch partner residence permit at first. However, going on, I realized the international residence permit had no use for me. So I emailed the school and told them that I wanted to cancel the residence permit, the international student residence permit. So I canceled that and I stuck only to my Dutch partner residence permit. Once you have your Dutch partner residence permit, you have to be aware that you're allowed to have some benefits and some you are not allowed. That would actually impact your residence status. So if you do not want to be in a situation where your residence is revoked, you do not access the public funds that you are not meant to access. And that is all for this video. Please give me a thumbs up and subscribe. I'll see you in my next video.